All right. Good morning, everybody. Uh, just let me know if you can hear me okay. All right. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. We'll go ahead and join palms as we get started. And please repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. And keeping the palms joined. And putting the palms down. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'll be leading you all this morning. I always like to get started with a question. There's a chat box there on the screen. If you're new to joining us, you can go ahead and type in your answer or your response if you'd like. It's nice for people to communicate with each other a little bit and just kind of get a sense of, the people you're sitting with, which is always helpful, I find. So I think the question for today just popped into my head. Trying to think how to phrase this. So think about all the time that you maybe spend critiquing others or commenting on others or judging others or complaining about others. It's only an hour time this morning, so we don't have a lot of time for that. But think about all the time you spend critiquing others and finding faults in others. And then ask yourself, how much time do you spend exploring yourself, your actions, your words, your thoughts? So when we're in a period of time where it may be more likely to throw blame and fault and judgment on others, there's also a moment where it helps to stop and begin to reflect on ourselves. So I'm not sure how to respond to that or what format you want to take. But whatever you'd like, feel free to type in as little or as much as you'd like. I think very simply, how much time do you spend trying to critique others versus how much time do you spend exploring yourself? I'll try to type that in here. How much time do you spend critiquing others relative to how much time you spend working on yourself? Okay. Because I think it's important that, as a practitioner, it helps to stay positive about yourself and not spend too much time in self-doubt, self-fear, self-hatred, self-critique, things like that. But it's also important to recognize where am I in my practice of being kind or patient or understanding or caring or loving? Where am I with these ideas? And not to judge yourself for it, but just to become aware that if this practice is about learning to be kinder and gentler humans to ourselves and others, we have to begin to explore when and where we are not kind to ourselves and to others. But if we spend so much time wrapped up on everybody else, what they're doing, what they're saying, how they're wrong, often that doesn't leave much time to think about where you are in your practice. So again, if you're just joining us and if you're new to the group, welcome. There's a chat box there on your screen. Feel free to chime in with your response to that question. We'll take a few minutes here just before we get started with the meditation. Again, just looking at how much time you spend critiquing others relative to how much time you spend working on yourself. And I think of this practice as it is work. It's not an escape. It's not going to a day spa. It's not a bubble bath. It's not checking out, on Netflix for 10 hours. It's actual work. So, all right. I'm too hard on both myself and others. My critiques of others seem more automatic, but my critiques of myself require effort and practice. Yeah, I think the honest approach always works, and the challenge there is, can you learn to be aware of your actions, your thoughts, your words, and recognize where we can improve without judging ourselves and without thinking that we're not good enough or something like that. So good to reflect on that. I'm probably judging and then being introspective about myself more than others, but still definitely spend unnecessary time judging others. Judgment of self often accompanies judgment of others. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point too, is that if we weren't comparing ourselves to others, judgments wouldn't exist. In other words, if we didn't spend so much time looking and thinking and talking about what other people have and look like and, how they live their life and how we wish ours was, then the comparison would go away. There's a lot of people with social media that's why it's so harmful for a lot of people, because they see so much of what they want and crave and desire, and maybe they don't have that in their life. So we have to be careful with that, the perceptions and how we view things, and then how we reflect that back on us. My family are pros at judging others. I've needed to make a conscious effort to refrain from talking about and judging others. Now it's probably still 60 judgment, 40 self-reflection. That's still pretty good. An ongoing consciousness practice. Yeah, definitely. It is ongoing. You bring up family, judging others. I think when we are around people, family, friends, whoever it might be, same thing as I was just talking about social media. If we're constantly engaged with people who all they do is spend their time talking about and judging others, it's really difficult to remove yourself from that. But it's a practice. You can be in all the dialogue and listen to what people are saying, but it doesn't mean you have to respond, and it doesn't mean you have to let it work you, kind of get you all worked up. You can just sit with what people are saying and just listen. But yeah, difficult practice. But what about when someone criticizes me, then I spend way too much time trying to do better, be better, but that ends up making me critical of myself. Well, when others criticize us, that's their mess, their perception, their views, and not ours. And when people criticize us, they have no idea what they're talking about, whether you think they know you or not. As I always say, it's not our place to throw critiques and judgments onto others. So for me, part of this practice is recognizing that some people just have it in them to throw critiques and judgments at you. And that's coming from their own insecurities, their own ignorance, their own anger, their own issues. The critique that we hear is really just a reflection of their pain and suffering on the inside. So, which is different, I think, if you look at like a mentorship relationship where people are, and helping you see things to work on, that's very different from this critique I think you're talking about. But when people continue to throw critiques at you, again, that's just a reflection of their own misery inside. So for me, try to see it as that and really not get wrapped up in the words that they're sharing. So, All right, one more here. Judge myself and others way too much. Also label everything as good or bad. Yeah, I think a lot of us are probably in that boat, and that's really the practices. Can we go beyond this idea of good versus bad and right versus wrong, and just recognize that there are in life endless series of decisions, and each action, each karmic choice, body, speech, and mind, has uh, a following action to it. In other words, it's the law of cause and effect. So um, every action leads to every cause has an effect, and that effect leads to another cause. So learning to become mindful of this and aware of how much we do it. That's why I bring it up. It's just important to explore. And for those who are maybe new to Buddhism, which for me is always a joy, I bring this topic up because often people will be so miserable and tired of listening to others and trying to escape to something. And then when you run to Buddhism, really what you're escaping to is to this kind of ripping open your heart, ripping open your mind, and exploring who you are. So, all right. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I appreciate you all sharing. We'll start with the meditation practice. For those who are joining for the first time, a couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, outside, wherever you are. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and the practice of meditation is learning to go beyond the chaos and abide in sensation of breath. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap. I'll guide us as we begin, and we will settle into a little bit of silence. Again, most important with this practice is don't expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, we'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing that you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions. These are not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or the chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Breathing in, follow breath in, breathing out, follow breath out. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe, knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, and no one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. Most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where we come from or what we believe in or where we think we're going, our whole life is filled with things that happen. We react. More things happen, more reactions. That's it. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not fun, but it's free. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else. And that's it. Often people come to Buddhism thinking it's going to be this complicated, ancient teaching. And it is incredible how relevant it is to your life in this very moment. Learning to be kind and generous and compassionate and forgiving is always relative to the present moment. Don't complicate this practice. As I spoke about at the beginning, explore what you think, what you say, and what you do, and how that impacts your life and the life of those around you. So with that, I always prefer to use the really second half of our time together to open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. If you are new, again, welcome. You'll see a chat box there on the screen. Feel free to type in your question or comments. There are no wrong questions or no wrong comments. Just feel free to share whatever you'd like, and I will respond. So I'll turn it over to you for questions. So we have a question from Anne. How do you deal with the fear and anger that arises from recent events? Okay. I have a biracial family, and it all feels so dangerous and threatening. So the reason I paused, Anne, and you've known me long enough, you could probably answer it exactly how I would. Let's just start with the first part of the question. How do you deal with the fear and anger? And stop right there. Now, let me first say, for those who don't know me, and you've heard me talk about this enough, that I sit here very well aware of my white male privilege and every other privilege that I have. So everything I'm saying, it's impossible to not have that lens or that view. The privilege is something that I am very well aware of. So I, as always, will try to respond as wisely and compassionately, but also recognizing the privilege that I have, that the fears that a lot of people face, I've never had to face. I don't know what it's like to live in fear from being a person of color. I don't know what it's like to live in fear for being a female and the way that women are treated. I don't know what it's like to live in fear for someone who is part of the LGBTQ community. So I can never fully answer these questions without first acknowledging that. Now, what I will say, and again, the reason I paused, is that we have so many things in our lives that cause fear and anger. And as I've talked about recently, the current events to millions of people around the world, especially in this country, they have no problems with the current events. To millions of people, they have tremendous problems with the current events. Now, 6 months ago, we lived in fear and anger for something else. 6 years ago, we lived in fear and anger for something else. 6 months from now, 6 years from now, the fear and anger will always change. We can always apply it to the relative current situation, meaning right now, bringing up the events in DC, white supremacy, all of those things which are real and disgusting. But the fear and anger has a lot to do with recognizing what can I control and what can I not control. So to me, living in fear has a lot to do with wanting to control what other people do for my safety. And I completely understand that. But the challenge is you can't control. All we can focus on is what are our actions. And the fear will arise, the anger will arise, and we overcome anger with compassion. We overcome fear. For me, fear is tied to ignorance. And the way we overcome ignorance or fear is with wisdom. Now, these are simple words, wisdom and compassion, which are really the two wings to Buddhist practice. And it sounds so easy to just say, I'm just going to go be compassionate and wise. But my guess, Anne, is you're going to have a really difficult time if I tell you to have compassion for a person who's a white supremacist. But that's what the practice is. It is a practice of having compassion for all sentient beings, regardless of what they do or what they believe in. I'm not telling you to like them. I'm not telling you to agree with them. I'm not telling you to hang out and have tea with them. But the practice is to understand, and this is where the wisdom comes in, to understand that these human beings are just simply a condition of the environment that they grew up in. A child is born, and then they are taught many things. I don't believe a child is born racist, but the family, the location, the friends, the education, the environments that they are in shape them to have certain views. Now, we would like to think, and many do, that as they grow up, that they would maybe potentially mature and grow out of these views, but we all know how difficult it is to change our views. So if someone has been taught their entire life that being a white supremacist is the way to be, the wisdom is to understand that they've never known any different. Really difficult. The fear and anger will change, as I was saying at the beginning. There will always be things that we are afraid of and that we are angry at. And this is what it is right now. The fear and the anger, from my personal experience of dealing with a lot of anger growing up, is not something that makes us healthier and happier. It destroys us. The fear and anger stops us from allowing to live. Now we have to look at how are these situations impacting our immediate life today. And in some ways, they're impacting it drastically, and in some ways, not. But will I spend today afraid? And will I spend today angry? Or will I spend today focusing on the beauty and love and joy of what I have in my life? And there's someone here who, is a dear friend of mine and joins us all the time. I won't put them on the spot, but a few years ago, I suggested maybe watching less news. And simply watching less news is an easy way to take your mind away from the fear and anger for just a short period of time. We could be sitting with someone we know and love and talking about all the joy and happiness we've had in our lives, or talking about memories of childhood or good experiences or dreams and we'd like to have. Or we could sit with someone we know and love for 3 hours and stare at the news and talk about hate and anger and fear. Again, I'm not discounting the fact that these things are real and are happening, but a lot of it is what is our approach throughout the day? I'm not suggesting to ignore the news. I'm not suggesting to close your eyes and be ignorant to what's happening in the world. I don't think that's wise at all. I commented in something I posted and shared recently about I think the quote was, "If you can't be kind, be quiet." And someone got offended or insulted by that, and I wasn't telling people to stay silent. What struck me about it was, if you can't be kind, be quiet. And I went on to discuss and share and talk about in a few different formats or places that silence can be extremely, or kindness can be extremely loud. So we don't have to just sit back and allow the world to be as it is. We can work very kindly and compassionately and wisely at changing it. So, as you know, Anne never answers. These are very real and difficult times and challenges we're facing. And so those are just some thoughts at this moment. So I hope they're helpful. And, it's to me really sickening what's been going on. And to think about having compassion for people that, bring so much pain and suffering into lives is really difficult. So thanks, Anne. Other thoughts, questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with? And I think we all have to recognize that, just as a follow-up thought to that, Anne, and for everybody else, we have to recognize our place in all of this. For me, as someone with privilege, I have to recognize, how can I use that? So, become aware of what privilege you have and how you can use that to try to create change. I think that's very important. Other thoughts, question? There's a great expression. that I came across maybe about 2 years ago. It's anti-racist. And so we talk about being an ally to, say, people of color. But it's one thing to be an ally, and it's another thing to be an anti-racist. And I think it's just a much stronger word that, I'm not just going to sit here and give you a hug and hold your hand and be your friend, but I'm actually going to fight for you and with you and alongside you. So, I look at people like Thich Nhat Hanh, who did incredible social justice work, with Martin Luther King. And to me, he's an incredible role model and an example of when we see communities of people that are oppressed to not just sit back and say it's okay, because it's not. There's nothing in Buddhism that says just sit back and allow things to happen. Buddhism is a very active, alive practice. It is the law of cause and effect. It's not just sitting under a tree looking at the stars. It's very alive, it's very active, it's very engaged, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, engaged Buddhism. And so when there are things happening that you are not okay with, then engage in that with kindness, with compassion, with wisdom. Can you talk more about dualistic in Buddhism? So the Buddha talks about non-duality, and I forget, Keith, if this was you who asked last week, but someone asked recently about the Diamond Sutra, and I referenced Mahayana Sutras, Prajnaparamita Sutras, the Heart Sutra, where the Buddha teaches that we suffer because of our dualistic mind. Anti-racism is often defined as a commitment to fighting racism in all places, including ourselves. Thank you very much, Marisa. Yes, beautiful. Anti-racism is often defined as a commitment to fighting racism in all places, including ourselves. So, Keith, back to the duality, is to recognize that we see the world as me versus you, this versus that, right versus wrong, good versus bad. And these are all judgments that we put on things. This duality is what causes a lot of our suffering, right? We look at someone who looks one way and we want to look that way because we don't think the way we look is good enough. So therefore we suffer, right? We want to have this type of house because we don't like the way our house is. We like their house better. Therefore we suffer, right? It's all relative. I saw something recently. It was really funny. My friend sent me this thing where, there's the tiny house movement. And then there's the movement, especially now with the pandemic, of all these people who are just living in, getting these, totally tricked out vans and living in these vans and traveling around and all this stuff. And my friend sent me something about, how 30 years ago, if you lived by the lake, in your van, it was kind of frowned upon. And nowadays, if you lived by the lake in your van, that's like a life goal. So I thought that was really interesting when it comes to looking at duality, is that it's all just our perception of things, right? The Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, is really seen as ultimate truth, the true nature of reality. So there is reality as it is, then there's our perception of it. And because we go through our days judging this versus that, I like this person and not that person. Right? I want to go here and I don't want to go there. I want to eat this type of food and not that type of food. I want to wear these clothes and not those clothes. Right? Duality is cutting through all of that and just being present with things as they are, beyond judgment. But as soon as we start judging things, we will begin to suffer. Right? For any one of you, which is all of you, whoever thought you weren't this enough, or you weren't that enough, or you didn't look like this, you didn't look like that, or whatever you think your life is not enough of, the only reason that idea is there is because you saw it somewhere else. And we started comparing things. That's why one of my favorite practices, which really is not relevant now because hopefully you're not going anywhere to eat and sitting down, but you could probably still do this in delivery. Yeah, I haven't thought about that. You could. But one of my greatest practices is going to a restaurant and telling someone, if you spend $10 or $15 on a meal, just to sit down and tell the person serving you, I'd like anything on the menu for $15. If you're gluten-free or vegetarian or whatever it is, then you said, $15 gluten-free, vegetarian, but you just have them bring you food. For me, it was a beautiful practice. I lived in the monastery in Taiwan 15, 16 years ago for a year, 11 months actually. And 3 meals a day, we would sit down, we'd walk in, we were in silence. You sit down, you're at the table, you're in your robe, and then a bowl gets put in front of you. And whatever's in the bowl, you pick it up and you eat all of it and you put it down. If you wanted more, you would slide the bowl forward. And you didn't know what was going to be put in the bowl. There was always something different. But the idea was that you were just grateful to eat, right? And it was really hard because you knew there were a lot of different dishes that were being served, and you're living there long enough to know that there's certain things that you like more than others. And so your first bowl, you get something that you really like and you eat it. But then you're sitting there thinking like, well, wait, I'm still hungry, but I don't know if I'm going to get more of the food that I like. What if I put it out there and I get food I don't like? Well, then you still have to eat it. So it was a practice of cutting through. Again, duality it's really a very deep Buddhist teaching, but to try to put it in simple forms, just think about ordering food. That we're so picky and we have so many critiques. We send it back because it's not cooked well enough, or it's too this, or it's too that, or it's too hot, or it's too cold, or it's too crunchy, or it's too soft. I mean, everything. We often are just so spoiled and entitled and ridiculous. The Buddha was a homeless wandering beggar who put his head down and bowl up, and whatever was put in it, he ate. So this practice, sitting at the table, sliding the bowl forward, whatever was put in it, you ate. That's what the practice was. Now that, 28 years old, I grew my whole life eating every single thing I wanted when I wanted. If I didn't like it, I didn't eat it. And all of a sudden you're in a position to have to eat what's in front of you. It's a great practice. So you could still try it, even if you're ordering food or however you're getting food. So some thoughts on duality there, Keith. Hopefully it's helpful. Marley, and we'll close on this. This is a bit tangential, but I have often wondered about the monks who set themselves on fire as a means of protest. Would you mind telling us what your thoughts are about this? Yeah, so there's especially one very famous Vietnamese Buddhist monk. I forget his name at the moment, but I don't want to say it incorrectly. But there's a very famous image during the war of him setting himself on fire, and as a form of protest. Now, keep in mind, this is a very different mindset. As a Buddhist monk who has deep understanding of the causal relationship of all phenomena, has a deep understanding of the continuation of consciousness, has a deep understanding of the cycle of rebirth, that their mindset is very different than ours. So for us to look at someone and they've set themselves on fire, and for us to make this thought of like, oh, I could never do that, or how could I do that, or why would someone do that? It's very difficult to understand most likely the place of spiritual practice that they're in, right? Their level of understanding of, again, I come back to the continuation of consciousness, is very different. For an individual at that level of spiritual practice, that's probably equivalent to us just holding up a sign. I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm not encouraging anyone to do that. In fact, I'm just flat out saying don't do that. But I do my best to understand where they're coming from with that practice. So, anything else before we close? Good questions. All right, so I'll go ahead and I'll close on that. I think that's probably enough heaviness for this morning to ponder for the next 3 years. We'll join palms as we close. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. Last thing I want to say real quick, going back to Anne's question, and this thought just popped into my head as I was doing the offering, is that when we see people like this, there's so much hatred and so much anger coming from them and in them and around them already, that the last thing we want and need is more anger back at them. Really difficult practice, but adding anger to anger, again, it's like adding fuel to the fire. So difficult. But with that, a few announcements with some changes, some things coming up. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up the temple about 14 years ago to bring Buddhist practice to those who show up. Every night we have different classes going on, a full schedule on the website. We closed 10 months ago. So due to the pandemic, we closed March 12th. We'll continue to stay closed until we feel it's safe. I don't think we're anywhere near that yet, although hopefully maybe we're a few months or so away, but you really don't know. New classes Monday night. Ken has returned doing a Zen Buddhist class and meditation on Mondays. We have our family Sangha that returned this morning. That'll be twice a month, 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. And our book club will start today, which will be led and chaired by Marisa. And we will be reading Orjin Chong Rinpoche's book, Pristine Mind, An Unconditional Guide to Happiness. It's a beautiful text. That will start today at 2:00. That will be also twice a month. If you don't have the book, you want the book, Buddha for You has a new website. It's really easy to go online and purchase it there. So that'll be nice to just gather for an hour and discuss the text. Other than that, the full schedule, like I said, is on the website. Recovery classes, the family classes, the college groups, teenage group, all of that's still going. So thank you all for being here. If I never see you again, think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. And let's just please continue to be as safe as possible and as healthy as you can. And I wish you well.